My daughter-in-law set a mason jar of her homemade cranberry chutney in front of me at Thanksgiving dinner and said, in her brightest voice, "Mom, would you mind? My hands are all greasy from the kitchen." 9 people were sitting at that table. I reached for the jar with both hands. My right shoulder has not had a working rotator cuff since March of 2001. I can write, I can drive, I can carry a bag of groceries if it is not too heavy. I cannot apply rotational force overhead or outward on that side. My grip releases without warning when the angle is wrong. My daughter-in-law has known this for 11 years. She stood near the head of the table and watched me try. The lid did not move. She reached over after about 5 seconds and lifted the jar from my hands and opened it herself, clean as anything, one smooth twist. "Old lids," she said to the table. Then she poured the chutney into a bowl and did not sit down. She picked up her wine glass instead. "I want to say something while we're all together." Her mother, who was sitting in my late husband Edmund's chair at the head of the table, set her fork down. My son Douglas put his hands in his lap and did not look at me. Douglas and I have found a way to access the settlement funds. It's going to keep the business alive. The settlement income is going to be part of the family plan going forward. I held my hands in my lap and said nothing at all. I had known this was coming for exactly 12 days. What I had already done about it was going to take until February to be heard by anyone. And when it was heard in a courthouse on a Tuesday morning, with someone at a machine typing every word of it. Welcome back to Fierce Mom Stories. I'm glad you're here. My husband Edmund and I bought the house on Sadler Street in Cobourg in April of 1991, $173,000. 4 bedrooms, a backyard with a silver maple that drops leaves well into September, and a furnace that kicks on twice an hour through the Ontario winters with a sound like someone knocking politely on a wall. Edmund always said it sounded like the house asking permission to stay warm. He died in November of 2021. Heart attack in the front hallway, putting on his boots to walk the dog. He was 68. The following October, my daughter-in-law called and offered to take Thanksgiving off my hands. Would it be all right if she hosted it here at my place? Her dining room seats 6, mine seats 10. She arrived at 9 in the morning with her own tablecloth and her own wine, and she has arrived at 9 every Thanksgiving morning since. "Don't cook anything, Mom, just rest." I stopped arguing about it in 2022. It was easier, and for a long time I told myself that easier and kind were close enough to be the same thing. This year, she called in the 3rd week of September. She wanted to know if the old cast-iron roaster was still in the bottom cupboard. She wanted to know how many wine glasses I had. Then she asked one more thing, in the way you ask about weather. She wanted to know what day the Manulife payment came in. I told her it came on the 15th. Nobody in my family understood why that mattered until January. I should tell you what the Manulife payment actually is, because everything that happens next depends on it. On a Tuesday morning in March of 2001, I was driving eastbound on the 401 near the Wooler Road exit outside Trenton, Ontario. I was 43 years old. I was on my way to an accounts review in Belleville, listening to a CBC morning program about something I cannot now remember. A transport truck came up behind my car and did not stop. The force drove my front end into the ditch and my right arm into the door frame as the seat buckled. What that did to my right shoulder is called a complete rotator cuff rupture. What it did to my spine at T11 and T12 is called a compression fracture. I did not lose the use of my legs. I want to say that plainly because I know people expect worse. I walked out of Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center in Toronto 8 months later. I walked slowly, and I walked with a cane for 2 years after that, and I walk without one now on most days. But my right shoulder was rebuilt 3 times between 2001 and 2009, and it was not built to lift or twist or bear weight on that side. I have compensated so thoroughly over 24 years that most people who meet me now do not know anything is wrong until they watch me pour from a full kettle. My son Douglas was 19. He was in his 2nd year at Queen's University in Kingston. He came home. The case settled in 2003. The transport company's insurer was Intact Insurance. We mediated in June of that year in a boardroom in Toronto. I sat across from two men I had never met and would never see again, and we agreed on a number. The settlement was structured as periodic payments administered through Manulife Financial. Contract number MAN-SS 2003-0847. I have known that number by heart for 22 years. I read the anti-assignment clause out loud to Edmund in the parking garage afterward, sitting in the car with the door open, because I still could not fold my legs in quickly. The payments cannot be assigned, transferred, pledged, encumbered, or otherwise alienated in whole or in part. Edmund listened to the whole thing. Then he said, "So it's yours and nobody can touch it." I said, "That's exactly what it means." I had helped our firm's accountant review structured settlement arrangements before. That was the first time I ever read one about myself. 22 years later, a judge in Cobourg would ask me to read it again into the court record. The payment comes on the 15th of every month. It is $5,700 and it covers what it needs to cover. A home care aide named Precious who comes 3 mornings a week. Physiotherapy, twice monthly, at the Northumberland Hills Clinic on Elgin Street. Medications, property taxes. Douglas has known about the payment since 2003, the way children know about adult things they are not supposed to discuss, completely, and in silence. In September of 2021, when Edmund was in the cardiac unit at Northumberland Hills Hospital, I signed a limited power of attorney naming Douglas as my authorized representative for banking. It was practical. I could not be in 2 places at once. The POA had a 2-year expiry clause, standard language. It expired in September of 2023. My daughter-in-law found it in the fireproof box in the bedroom closet in the summer of 2024. She had come to help me sort through Edmund's papers. I did not know she had looked at anything else in that box. I know now that she did. The first call to Manulife came in November of 2023. I know the date because I later asked for the contact log in writing, and they sent it to me. A caller identifying as a family member asked whether the payment rights on my contract were transferable. Manulife told the caller, as they tell everyone who asks, that the contract prohibits assignment. The caller did not leave a name. I was recovering from knee surgery in November of 2023. My daughter-in-law was at the house 3 times that week. I do not know what she saw on my dining room table, but the Manulife annual statement had been sitting there since October, and the total guaranteed benefit figure is printed in a box at the bottom of the second page. $2,840,000. That is the sum of every payment from 2003 through 2038, added in a straight line. It is not a balance. It is not a vault. It is the total of 35 years of monthly deposits, most of which have already been made, and the rest of which will arrive until January of 2038, when I will be 80. But it is the number that gets printed at the bottom. And it is the number that gets read first. October 1st, 2025. A Wednesday evening. Douglas came by at 7 o'clock with a gray folder under his arm. He stood in the kitchen with his coat on. "Mom, I need you to sign some updated beneficiary paperwork for Manulife. They're doing an annual review, and if it doesn't go in by the 15th, your October payment might be delayed. There is no annual beneficiary review process at Manulife. There is an annual statement, and I receive it in October, and it does not require a signature. I know this because I have received 22 of them." I turned on the lamp over the kitchen table. I sat down. I read the folder. Page 1. Transfer and Assignment Agreement. Purchaser. Sunrise Payment Solutions, Inc., Mississauga, Ontario. Page 3. A Payment Schedule. Remaining payments, 2026 through 2038, $1,422,000. Offered purchase price, $5,000. Page 7. A Disclosure Statement. Date on the disclosure statement, October 1, 2025. Page 11. A Waiver of Independent Legal Advice, blank. I read every page. It took me 24 minutes. Douglas stood by the door the entire time with his coat on and did not sit down. I picked up my pen and signed the transfer agreement. I signed the disclosure statement acknowledgement. I wrote the date on both. October 1, 2025. And beside each signature, in my own handwriting, I wrote the time. 7:24 p.m. Douglas looked at my hand. "Why are you writing the time?" "Habit," I said. He took the folder and left. I heard his truck back out of the driveway. I sat at the kitchen table with my hand flat on the wood for a long while. Then, I got up and put the kettle on. I had spent 30 years as a bookkeeper at Lakeshore Furnishings on Division Street. I processed payroll. I reconciled accounts. I filed HST returns and year-end statements, and produced the documentation that went to our external auditors every April. When you do that work for 3 decades, you develop habits about paperwork that are almost physical. You write the time. You keep the copy. You note the discrepancy before you say one word. I had spent 12 days waiting for that folder. Now I had what I needed. I should tell you the one thing about all of this that required any real nerve. After Douglas left, I went to the kitchen drawer, where I keep the things I do not want to lose, and I took out a small blue rubber ball about the size of a mandarin orange. I set it on the table beside my tea. In August of 2001, an occupational therapist at Sunnybrook named Deborah sat down beside my bed and put this ball in my left hand to show me. 50 squeezes, she said, twice a day. Your grip is going to try to give up on you. Do not let it. I said something short and rude. She wrote it in my chart. We got along fine after that. 50 squeezes, twice a day. I have done it every morning at the kitchen table since September of 2001, and every evening while the furnace knocks in the wall. That is more than 11,000 days without skipping. It is why I can still sign my name with my right hand. It is why I could grip that pen firmly enough to write 7:24 p.m. in the margin beside my signature, which was going to matter more than anything else in this story. My daughter-in-law put a sealed mason jar in front of me at Thanksgiving dinner 13 days later because she thought she had already won. She had no idea what that ball does in my hand. October 14, 2025. The Cobourg post office on King Street opens at 8:30. I was there at 8:38 with 3 envelopes. I had typed them the night before, printed them, signed them, and written the time beside each signature. Old habit. Best habit I have. The first letter went to the Benefit Administration Office at Manulife in Waterloo. It revoked, effective immediately, the authorized representative designation on file naming Douglas Ashford. It instructed the company to release no information about contract MAN SS 2003-0847 to any person other than the payee, and to direct any third-party inquiry about payment rights to me in writing within 5 business days. It also changed the payment deposit from the joint account Douglas and I had opened in 2021 to a new account in my name only at TD Bank, effective with the November payment. The second letter went to Sunrise Payment Solutions in Mississauga. It cited Section 81(1)(g)(1) of the Income Tax Act of Canada, the provision that makes structured settlement payments non-taxable to the recipient. That provision only holds if the payments are non-assignable. It directed Sunrise attention to the fact that their disclosure statement, dated the same day as the transfer agreement, had made no mention whatsoever of the tax consequence of a transfer. If the assignment proceeded, the present value of all remaining payments, approximately $1.2 million by any reasonable calculation, would become taxable income to me in the year of transfer. Federal and provincial combined, at my income level, that tax liability would approach $580,000, approximately everything they had offered to pay me. I was not threatening anyone in that letter. I was informing a company that their disclosure was materially incomplete and that I would raise this in any proceeding where it became relevant. The third letter went to Manulife's records department. It requested the complete third-party contact history on file for contract MAN SS 2003-0847, certified and dated, by registered mail. The postal clerk that morning counted my change back in loonies because I had paid in a 20 and a handful of coins. He pressed 3 green tracking cards onto the backs of the envelopes, one at a time. I want to be exact about what I did that morning, because people tend to imagine it as larger than it was. I did not hire anyone. I did not confront a single person. I changed a bank account, revoked an authorization, and asked for a document I was legally entitled to. $41.85 in total. The contact log from Manulife arrived on November 3rd in a thick envelope signed by a benefits administrator in Waterloo. I read it at the kitchen table. June 2021, authorized representative added, Douglas Ashford. November 2023, inquiry. Caller asked about transferability of payment rights. Caller identified as family member, no name given. January 2024, account summary and payment schedule requested. September 29, 2025, expired power of attorney submitted by Giselle Ashford requesting full account access. Authorization denied. Document expired September 2023. October 2025. Transfer agreement received from Sunrise Payment Solutions, Inc. I read the September 29 entry 3 times. I know what happened that day. I had mentioned the week before that I could not log into the Manulife portal. My browser kept timing out. She had offered to look at my laptop. I let her sit at my kitchen table for 40 minutes. I thought she was fixing the browser. She must have found the scanned POA still saved in my documents folder from 2021. She submitted it 2 days later. Manulife rejected it as expired. So, they moved to Plan B, which was to bring the folder to me in person. She had been watching that account since 2023. She started actually moving on it in January of 2024. The September POA attempt failed, and so by October 1st they brought the folder to my kitchen. A 24-minute read under a lamp, and they thought it was done. I spread all the documents on the dining room table on a Saturday afternoon in November, the same table. I worked it the way I had worked the firm's accounts for 30 years. Start with dates, put everything in date order. Check every number twice. It took me 35 minutes to find what I was looking for. Transfer agreement, signed October 1, 2025. Time noted, 7:24 p.m. Disclosure statement acknowledgement. Signed October 1, 2025. Time noted, 7:24 p.m. The disclosure statement itself. Dated October 1, 2025. Ontario's consumer protection principles and the standard terms within Sunrise's own agreement required that a disclosure statement be provided to the consumer a minimum of 2 business days before the signing of any transfer agreement. Both documents had been signed on the same evening, in the same kitchen, with the same pen, in the same minute. I had not broken their agreement. I want to say that precisely. I had read what they put in front of me. I filled in the date correctly and wrote the time beside it, because that is what I do. That is the whole of what I did on October 1st. And it turned out to be enough. There was one item in that folder I had not signed, the waiver of independent legal advice on page 11. I had left it blank on October 1st. I left it blank in November, too. Instead, on a Monday in mid-November, I drove to King Street and sat down with a lawyer named Sheila Dobbin, whose office is above the bookshop and who has practiced civil law in Northumberland County for 26 years. $1,500 retainer, $300 an hour. I wrote the check myself. Somebody always asks who paid. Sheila confirmed what I already knew, which is different from knowing it alone. In Ontario, she said, a structured settlement cannot be voluntarily assigned. The contract prohibition is enforceable, and the Income Tax Act makes it a near impossibility in any case. The disclosure statement's failure to mention the tax consequence was, in her view, more than careless. And she said, if Sunrise files for court enforcement, the hearing is public. Every document they file becomes part of a public record. I want it on the record, I said. She looked at me over her reading glasses. That is a choice, Mrs. Ashford. I know it is. She asked if I wanted her to write to Sunrise first, to give them the chance to withdraw quietly. I thought about the mason jar. I thought about Colette sitting in Edmund's chair for the 3rd year in a row, and Douglas staring at his plate. And my granddaughter Phoebe looking at me from across the table with that still expression she gets when she is deciding how to feel about something. No, I said, I want it to go all the way. I contacted Ingrid Sorensen, a certified financial planner in Cobourg, whose office is in the professional building on Division Street. $1,200. Her letter is dated November 12, 2025. She confirmed the present value of the remaining payments at the applicable federal rate, approximately $1.1 million. Sunrise offer of $580,000 represented 48.7 cents on the dollar. She confirmed that the disclosure statement's omission of the Income Tax Act consequences was, in her professional opinion, materially misleading. And then she noted something I had not found on my own. Page 8 of Sunrise internal intake paperwork, included in the folder as an administrative attachment, listed an origination fee of 8%, totaling $46,400, payable upon completion to an independent consultant. The consultant's name, G. Fortin. My daughter-in-law's maiden name is Fortin. She became Giselle Ashford 11 years ago. Her professional certifications, her employment history, her consulting work, all registered under Fortin. She had brought a funding company my file at 48 cents on the dollar, and she was going to be paid $46,400 to do it. Nobody called about Christmas. There was no conversation, no discussion, no explanation. There was simply no call. On December 23rd, her mother posted a photograph of a set dining table and wrote underneath it, "Christmas with my beautiful family." I counted the place settings. There were 10. At 9:11 on Christmas night, my granddaughter Phoebe sent me a photograph of the tree in their living room. One line below it, "Saved you some shortbread." I ate scrambled eggs at the kitchen counter. Then I did my evening squeezes with the blue ball, because it was evening, and I do not skip evenings. On January 8, 2026, Sunrise Payment Solutions filed an application in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice at the courthouse on King Street West in Cobourg, seeking enforcement of the transfer agreement. They filed because they had no other choice. Without a court order, the Income Tax Act consequences make the transaction worthless to them. There is no quiet version. There is only the courthouse. A process server came to the house on January 14th. I signed for the envelope at the door. Inside was the application, the transfer agreement with my signatures, the disclosure statement, and the hearing date. February 17, 2026, 10 a.m., Ontario Superior Court of Justice, Cobourg. On the applicant's list of dependents for the payee, Sunrise had typed, "None known." Phoebe is 15, Bennett is 10. I have not missed a school event I was invited to in 11 years. I spread everything on the dining room table again. Date order. Every signature checked against every other signature. Every number verified twice. 35 minutes. Transfer agreement. Signed October 1, 2025, 7:24 p.m. Disclosure acknowledgement. Signed October 1, 2025, 7:24 p.m. Disclosure statement. Dated October 1, 2025. 2 documents. Same evening, same minute, per my own notation in my own hand in blue ink. I said a word in my empty kitchen that I will not put into a recording. Then I called Sheila. Between January 8th and February 17th, my daughter-in-law called me 11 times. I did not answer. I replied to each call by email with a copy saved. I will be in court on February 17th. Anything further, please put it in writing. Douglas sent a text on a Sunday evening in early February. It said only, "Please, Mom." I answered it the same way. I laid my clothes on the bed the night before the hearing, the way my mother taught me. A navy blazer, gray, trousers, a blouse the color of good cream. I pulled my hair back, which I have done since I was 30, and which my daughter-in-law once described to her mother as severe. Then I got the ironing board out. I ironed a small square of cotton flannel that Deborah had cut from a pillowcase at Sunnybrook in 2001 and given me to keep the therapy ball clean. I folded it into a square about the size of a deck of cards. I put the ball in the center, folded the cloth around it, and put it in the outer pocket of my briefcase. I could not have explained that night exactly why I was doing it. Douglas called at 10:30. "Mom." His voice had that flat quality it gets when he is frightened and does not want to say so. "Please don't come tomorrow. I am asking you. If you do this, it's finished between us. The law requires me to appear, Douglas. Silence. Did you read the application? I asked. Giselle said you'd be too embarrassed to show up. And there it was. The whole architecture of the last 2 years in one sentence. They had not planned around a woman who would show up. They had planned around a woman who would be too ashamed to be seen. I sat through 8 months of rehabilitation at Sunnybrook, I said. I know what those rooms feel like. I think you should read the application before tomorrow. He hung up. I had never had my son hang up on me before in my life. I sat with the phone in my lap until the furnace knocked twice in the wall. Then I went to bed. The Cobourg courthouse is 12 minutes from Sadler Street, if you do not get caught at the Division Street lights. My friend Mabel drove me. She and I worked at Lakeshore Furnishings for 20 years together. She in purchasing, and I in accounts, and she brought a thermos of coffee and said very little, which is exactly what I needed. We were there at 9:40. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wooden benches, a radiator under the window that hissed when it fired, and a clock on the wall that ran about 3 minutes fast. Sunrise lawyer was a man named Perkins, mid-40s, navy suit, a briefcase on wheels. He did not look at me. In the second row, Douglas, my daughter-in-law. Her mother Colette, with her coat still on and her purse still on her arm. They came because my daughter-in-law wanted to watch. I understood that. I did not turn around, not once all morning. Mabel set the briefcase on the table and squeezed my shoulder once and went to sit in the gallery. Sheila came in at 9:52 and sat down beside me. Ready? I have been ready since October 1st, I said. The Honorable Justice Miriam Arkand came in at 10:02, sat down, and put on her reading glasses. Her first question was for Sunrise lawyer. Mr. Perkins, confirm for me that the disclosure statement was delivered to the respondent prior to execution of the transfer agreement, and that the applicable notice period was observed. He confirmed it, Your Honor. She looked at the documents in front of her. When was the disclosure statement delivered? October 1, 2025, Your Honor. And the transfer agreement was signed on. October 1, 2025, Your Honor. She removed her reading glasses. And what is the applicable notice period under the respondent's contractual terms and Ontario Consumer Protection Principles? He said it very quietly, 2 business days. Is the respondent present? I stood up. It takes me a moment on cold mornings, and everyone in a courtroom always waits. Present, Your Honor, Marian Rose Ashford. Please be seated. Then it went the way it always goes when one side has paperwork and the other side has a plan. Mr. Perkins said the transfer would allow me to access funds I would not otherwise see until 2026 through 2038. He said I was 67 years old. He said the family supported the arrangement and was present in the courtroom to confirm it. I looked at the table in front of me. Douglas did not look at me. Your Honor, I said, when Justice Arkand turned my way, I have 3 documents. The first one is theirs. Sheila handed up the signature page of the transfer agreement and the disclosure acknowledgement. The transfer agreement is dated October 1, 2025. The disclosure acknowledgement is dated October 1, 2025. I noted the time beside both signatures, 7:24 p.m. That is my handwriting, on both pages. How are you certain the 2 documents were signed on the same occasion? Because I wrote the time, Your Honor. I administered accounts for 30 years. I write the time on everything. Justice Arkand looked at one page, then the other, then back. Mr. Perkins asked to confer with his client. Justice Arkand said he could confer standing where he was. He came back in less than a minute. Your Honor, we would characterize the timing as an administrative matter that can be addressed with a corrected acknowledgement, dated separately, she said, without raising her voice. The notice period exists precisely to prevent a document from being placed in front of someone and signed on the same occasion it is received. It is not administrative. It is the condition on which the whole agreement stands. From the second row, clearly enough for the court monitor to hear it, my daughter-in-law said to my son, "You gave her both of them at once." Every person in that room turned around. Douglas said nothing. He was staring at the back of my head. I did not turn around. "The second document is mine, Your Honor." Sheila handed up Ingrid Sorensen's letter. I retained a certified financial planner independently. I paid $1,200. Her letter establishes that the present value of the payment Sunrise sought to purchase is approximately $1.19 million. The offered price was $580,000, which is 48.7 cents on the dollar. It also establishes that the disclosure statement made no mention of the Income Tax Act consequences of assignment. Under Section 81, 1G1, structured settlement payments are tax-exempt only if non-assignable. If this transfer had proceeded, the present value of the remaining payments would have become taxable income to me in the year of transfer. My combined federal and provincial tax liability would have been approximately $570,000. Approximately everything Sunrise offered to pay me. That figure appears on page 2 of Ms. Sorensen's letter, with her calculation methodology attached. Justice Arcand read for a moment. "There is a further item on page 3, I said. "I see it," she said. She did not look up. "Mr. Perkins, your client's intake paperwork discloses an origination fee of 8%, payable to an independent consultant. To whom?" "A consultant, Your Honor, listed as G. Fortin." "Is this person present in the courtroom?" A pause from the second row. Then my daughter-in-law raised her hand. "And your relationship to the respondent?" Her voice was steady. "I am her daughter-in-law, Your Honor." Colette began to cry, the kind of crying that is meant to be heard across a room. Justice Arcand did not look up. "The third document, Your Honor, is page 14 of the applicant's own filing. I purchased a copy at the clerk's window last week." Sheila handed it up. "It is the third-party contact log for my Manulife contract, which I had requested from Manulife directly in October and which Sunrise obtained through their own intake process. I would draw the court's attention to the entry dated September 29, 2025. An expired power of attorney was submitted to Manulife by Giselle Ashford requesting full account access. Manulife rejected it. The document had expired 2 years prior. 11 days later, my sons arrived at my home with the transfer agreement. Justice Arcand read the entry. She read it a second time. Then from the second row, my son stood up, and for a few seconds, in a Cobourg courtroom on a Tuesday morning in February, he was a boy I recognized entirely. "I was home alone, for a year, Mum," he said. "You were in Toronto and Dad, I was working doubles, and I was 14 years old and you were just gone." His voice broke in the middle of it. I closed my eyes for 1 second only. Then he found the rest of it. "If you block this, I lose everything. I lose the business, the equipment, the yard. You're choosing a piece of paper over your own family." I had waited 24 years for the first half of that sentence. He gave me the second half 4 seconds later. Justice Arcand let the room settle. "Mrs. Ashford, anything further?" "One paragraph, Your Honor, from the original settlement contract." I read the anti-assignment clause into the record. "Cannot be assigned, cannot be transferred, cannot be pledged, encumbered, or hypothecated in whole or in part." I set the paper down. That language is not there to protect the insurance company. It exists because the Income Tax Act requires it. A structured settlement is tax-exempt precisely, and only because no one, including me, can convert it into someone else's asset. It was written that way in 2003, before my daughter-in-law had any connection to this family. Then I reached into the outer pocket of my briefcase. I took out the flannel square, unfolded it, and set the small blue rubber ball on the corner of the table. Justice Arcand looked at it. In August of 2001, a therapist at Sunnybrook gave me one of these and told me to squeeze it 50 times, twice a day. She said, "Don't skip a day, not for anything." I have not skipped a day in 24 years. It is why I can still sign my name. I did not say the other part aloud. I did not need to. Everyone in the second row already knew what had happened at the Thanksgiving table with the cranberry chutney and the mason jar and the 9 people watching. Justice Arcan took off her glasses. Application denied. The Memorandum of Decision was filed February 24, 2026. Application denied. Disclosure statement not delivered within the required notice period. Failure to disclose material tax consequences under the Income Tax Act. Evidence of an undisclosed consultant relationship constituting a conflict of interest. It is a public document. Anyone can walk into the Cobourg courthouse and ask for it. Sunrise Payment Solutions withdrew on March 3rd. Without a court order, the tax consequences make the transaction worthless. There is no workaround. There is the contract and the statute, and that is all there is. My daughter-in-law's name appears in the Memorandum of Decision as the undisclosed consultant. That document is now part of the public court file. The dental group she managed in Peterborough did not renew her contract in April. I did not cause that. I simply appeared in a courtroom with the paperwork they had filed themselves. Douglas surrendered the second truck fleet to the equipment lender in March. He moved the business to a smaller yard off the highway near Baileyborough. He is a good landscaper. He always was. That was never the problem. Colette moved to her sister's place in Sudbury. The in-law suite above my son's garage turned out to have been promised on the basis of money that was never going to arrive. The November payment came into the new TD account on the 15th. Nobody called to ask about it. That was the part I had not anticipated, not the courtroom, but the silence afterward. The telephone that stopped ringing, the moment there was nothing left in me to unlock. In March, I wrote my son a letter. 1 stamp, regular mail, no tracking, 3 paragraphs. The first one said that I was sorry for the year I was not there, and that I have thought about it for 24 years, and that I had never once put it in writing. And I understand now that writing it is the only form that fully counts. The second one said, I was not sorry for writing the date and time beside my signature on October 1st, and that I would write them again on any evening I was handed a pen. The third paragraph was short because a boundary weakens with every extra word you put around it. Anything concerning my contract comes to me in writing. My kitchen door is where it has always been, and my grandchildren are welcome any day of the week, with no conditions attached. Phoebe came on a Saturday in April. She is 15. She took 2 buses from Peterborough and walked the last stretch up Sadler Street in the cold without telling her mother where she was going. We made butter tarts, my mother's recipe, brown sugar and a little vinegar in the filling, and she asked me why there were 2 small blue balls sitting on the kitchen windowsill. I told her about Sunnybrook. I told her about Deborah and the 50 squeezes and the 24 years without skipping. She picked up the ball and squeezed it once and set it back down. Why do you keep 2? One of them keeps my grip working, I told her. The other one I carried in my briefcase to a courtroom in February because I needed the people in that room to understand what I had been doing every single day for 24 years. She looked at me the way 15-year-olds do when they are deciding whether to believe you outright or just go along with it. Then she decided to believe me. We slid the butter tarts into the oven, and she asked me to teach her how to fold a tea towel so it stacks flat in a drawer, which is apparently something nobody had ever shown her. I showed her the method I learned as a girl, and we did the whole linen drawer together while we waited, and she talked about school, and the furnace knocked in the wall the way it always does, twice in an hour, the same as it has done every winter since 1991. People see a woman in her late 60s who moves carefully and they make their assumptions. They are welcome to keep making them. What has held me upright for 24 years was never the physio appointments and was never the monthly payment either. It was the plain habit of reading every line before I sign it, writing down the true time, and understanding that a woman who moves slowly through a room is not the same thing as a woman who is not paying attention. That is my story. 1 blue ball, 3 registered letters, and a room with someone typing. If this made you want to check whose name sits on your paperwork beside yours, Who has authorization on an account you opened in a hurry? What a power of attorney you signed years ago still allows. Go check it today. Do not wait for someone to hand you something across a table and call it a kindness. Drop a comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.